Now let's take a look at how we can create a large number of these little alien invaders at one time using a cloner object. So there's something in Cinema 4D called the MoGraph tools. You'll see, depending on the version, the bundle that you have, there is a MoGraph section up here on the menu. And one of the things inside of MoGraph is a cloner. That's kind of one of the basic building blocks of this. And really these tools are meant to help in the creation of broadcast, 3D text, fly-throughs, animation, things like that. You can do multiple objects and manipulate those in different ways to get some really cool broadcast kind of effects. And so that's one of the uses for those, but it's a really powerful tool here in Cinema 4D, and I wanted to check it out. So let's go to MoGraph and let's create a cloner object. And just like with these, the cloner works with objects that are parented underneath it. So I've got just this first object here, and I'll go ahead and close those up. The first one's visible, everything else is turned off for now. So what I want to do is just drop this extrude underneath the cloner. Now you can see something's happened here. It looks a little bit odd. What's really going on is there are now multiple copies of this extrude. So if we click on the cloner and we go to Object, you'll see there are a number of attributes that we can change here. Now the number of objects that we're seeing right now is 3. Okay, and the amount of space between is set to 50. So if I increase that, you can see I can spread those out. There's also a handle here that we can use to manipulate those. So I can kind of bring this down a little bit. I can move it, and you can see that's moving all 3 of those values. I can take it down, close to the original there, and then we can sort of move them up. So let's zero that out in the X and the Z. You can see it sort of makes a straight line. We can also increase the count. So I can take the count up, and you can see they just keep copying up along that line. So that's because the mode is set right now to linear. So it's basically making a line out of these copies. We can also go into transform, and we can begin to rotate these and create some really cool sort of looks here. It kind of speeds things up and lets us deal with these all as one piece, or all at one time rather. Now there are different modes here. We can change this from linear, and let's say we want to make a grid. We'll change it to a grid array, and now we have 3 different counts and 3 different sizes. So you can see we have all of our little handles here. We can grab those handles and start to pull them out. So let's kind of pull it out so they're spaced out a little bit. You can see we have now a 3x3 grid. And if we pull it out this way, you can see 3x3x3. So in our case, let's say that we don't necessarily want to have all of the ones in the back. Okay, and so we can take the count down in one of these axes, so that gives us kind of a flat grid. And maybe we want to increase the amount, so maybe there's 20. Maybe it's 20 by 20. Now the spacing needs to be increased because we have all of those copies in there. So we need to pull those out, and then we need to pull those out in this direction as well. Maybe that's a little bit too many. So let's do maybe 12 by 12. And there you can see the spacing. Now you can modify the spacing again by changing the handles, or you can change the size in here. Let's take this down a little bit so we just get kind of a grid. And so here you can see we have a nice grid of our little objects. Now at any time we can come in and change the object attributes. So I could come into the extrude that's underneath the cloner, and I could increase the thickness of it, or the movement rather. And you can see that that's increasing. Now what happens if I want to include more than just this one example? So let's turn the rest of them on, and let's drop them all inside the cloner. Let's start with just the first one. So now we've got two different objects inside of our cloner, and you can see what's going on. It's basically alternating between them. So going one after the other. We go into our cloner, you can see that it's set to iterate. If we drop in the other one underneath, and finally the last one, and let's kind of reorder those. So now it's doing the same order all the way across. Let's space this out a little bit more because now we have two things that are different sizes. Let me select the cloner, select our handle here. So you can see we're getting the exact same order. What if we want to randomize it a little bit? Well, we can go into clones. Instead of iterate, let's choose random. And that will place these different alien invader shapes randomly within our cloner. So there's not going to be kind of a set pattern. Makes them a little bit more random. And then we still have the ability to change the count. We can change and make it a complete 3D grid. Okay, we can go into transform and we can still kind of rotate those if we need to. But it's now going in randomly picking any of the objects that are underneath that cloner and placing those appropriately. So cloners are going to be a really powerful way to create some really interesting effects using geometry that you can just drop underneath, and you still have the flexibility to change it as well. So one of the cool things about using a cloner is the fact that we can use different kinds of effectors to make things appear, make them turn around, make them come into the frame. So let's take a look in the next lesson at using effectors with our cloner object.